made a set of videos recently about kind of end-of-life technological interventions which might give an individual the confidence to decide not to continue as a biological organism with all of the resource implications of that, but to just kind of die really, but to have some kind of, as I say, some confidence or some consolation provided by technologies. And I think I'd realised, I guess, thinking about it, that I've been talking in terms of 3 different agendas or 3 different applications or something, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I find myself talking about intelligent and expert systems. This idea that the things we do, the kind of social interactions we have, the birthday cards we send, the conversations we engage in, maybe the videos we make of this kind, the books we order, the kind of routine day-to-day life we have. I mean, that could relatively easily continue in our absence, and in many ways, as I said before, it does. Many of the things that we used to have to actually do is now automated. And presumably that could continue, or at least I can make a science fiction speculation that could continue to the point where pretty much every social interaction that I have, at least the disembodied ones, could continue in my absence. So there's a kind of social function of oneself that could continue beyond death, and I think that would give me some consolation. This idea that I have an archive of information that is being drawn upon actively, perhaps by members of my family. My kids could still ask me questions. They kind of know that I was dead, but they could kind of still ask me questions, or they could still talk to me, and they could still have an intelligent conversation of some kind, at least to the extent that we are capable of having intelligent conversations now, which isn't always the case. So that's one aspect of it, the kind of maintenance and continuation of social engagement, possibly even social engagement that can evolve. If you make an intelligent system that evolves and can change over time, becomes autopoietic, then I can imagine that being quite interesting, and that would give me a bit of consolation, certainly. The second agenda, which I've made a couple of videos about and other people have made far more, is more to do with, I guess, the internal life, not so much the kind of social aspects of the self in terms of how one engages with friends and family and institutions and all those kind of things. Not those aspects of yourself, but the ones that are driven, the internal ones, particularly things like drives and desires and wants and needs and fears and hopes, beliefs, all that kind of stuff, the internal life of the mind. And certainly in the conversations that's mostly been addressed in 2 ways. One, I think, at least, one addressing it by just regarding these things as, I don't mean just in a mere sense, but one by regarding these things as the kind of necessary baggage that comes along with being an involved organism. We're always going to have needs, we're always going to have desires, so stick it in VR, satisfy the needs in a kind of electronic version. And if it's possible to continue that after you die, or if the alternative is dying or that kind of painless and non-exploitative and non-resource consuming satisfaction of desires, well, that's fine, you know what I mean. Not quite sure what it would mean to continue that after death, but let's just, for the sake of arguing, assume the science fiction version of that, where your essential desiring programs just continue to run on some computer somewhere, alongside the social aspects of self that's doing its business. So there's those 2 things, the internal life of the mind represented by desires, and the external life of social self represented by interactions and engagements. And the third thing I found myself talking about was the brain, really, and it's, in a sense, it was unrelated. I didn't realise it was unrelated when I was talking about it, but I think it is in a sense, because it's what I was thinking about there is that these things that we do, these desirings that we have, and these engagements that we involve ourselves in, and these problem-solving exercises we set ourselves, and all of that, both internal and external activity that we engage in, and which we're so wedded to, and which in many ways, I guess, defines us as ourselves, and is us in a fairly substantial way, I think. All of that is, in a sense, just a set of programs running on a very fast parallel processing computer. The brain is essentially that. I mean, I know people will question that, but I'm not talking about Commodore 64, you know, or an old Atari. I'm talking about a very, very complex biological entity that does computation of some kind. And at the moment it's running these programs to do with finding things beautiful because they are notionally beneficial to our survival, finding things tasty because they're nourishing, you know, finding things repellent because they're either toxic or contaminating in some way, finding other people engaging or disengaging because of some relationships we have with them or may want to have with them. You know, it's doing all this stuff. So the computer is running the human program, and it's fine. You know, I'm not disputing that, and I'm not denigrating that. Obviously, there's a lot of jollies to be had from that particular bit of programming. But there is a question. You know, is that the best and most efficient use of that processing power, or just the most? See, I haven't even got a word for this. You see, is it the most use of that kind of processing power? It's impossible to say. It's impossible for me to say, I think, because I am one of the programs that it's running. So whilst I can recognise the power of the program that I am running, the power of the computer that I am running on as a piece of programming, I can't step out the box of my own imaginings, because obviously I'm limited to the code and the subroutines that are running my psyche right now, and are running the language within that psyche right now. But I know intellectually that this brain, if it was harnessed, could do different things than just run the Fred program with all of its subroutines to do with desires and engagements and motivations and wants and needs and beauty and love and dogs, perceptions. I'm incapable of thinking what else it could do, but I like the idea of thinking that it could do something else.